Hi, everyone. We're going to give just another minute or two so that all the attendees can get logged in on their computers. So you'll hear probably silence just for a few moments and then we'll get going. So bear with us, and this will give everyone a chance to get logged in to the webinar. All right, it looks like everyone's getting logged in now. So it's about 1 minute after the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Others can continue to get logged in. We'll take a few minutes for housekeeping. So welcome, first of all. My name is Bobby Harris, and I'll be your host for today for the Utility Broadband Alliance webinar. Again, this is technology opportunities from the 900 megahertz realignment, really that is going to enable utility private broadband deployment. We appreciate everyone being with us today. As the recording said, you are all in listen-only mode. We will do this a few introductions. Each one of our speakers will have a couple of slides to share their thoughts, and then we'll go into the Q&A. There is a tool on the right-hand side on the webinar tool where you can type in your questions for the audience. We'll be monitoring those and we'll work those into the Q&A period toward the end. If for some reason we don't get to your question, we will gather them all and put it into a Q&A document that we are creating for this topic completely. You should be able to see the screen. If any technology trouble comes up, hopefully you'll be able to resolve it by logging back in. Hopefully we're not going to have any challenges today. So we will get right on to it. For those of you who don't know the Utility Broadband Alliance, UBBA was founded in early 2019, and today we've got more than 30 members and 100 individuals or more from those organizations who participate on our working groups that are focused on the business drivers, the utility use cases from operations standpoint, the technology architecture and cybersecurity elements, as well as working with regulators when it comes to utility broadband networks. Just a quick word on the UBBA confidentiality and antitrust guidelines. We do follow these even in all of our meetings, although we do like to share an awful lot of knowledge, and that's the best part of the Alliance. So let's get right on then to our webinar topic. On May 13th, you guys may know the FCC unanimously confirmed the report in order to move forward with the process of realigning the 900 megahertz spectrum to enable utility broadband. This is the link to the FCC's website information, and we'll talk more about it, of course. That's the topic of this. But if you want to go out and read the official document, that's the web address for the PDF. Today, we're very fortunate that we have 5 UBBA members and technology leaders that are going to share their thoughts from their vast time in the utility industry, but also from their organization's perspective. And just as a note of introduction, Lance Johnson, first of all, is the Vice President of Spectrum Strategy and Government Affairs for Anterix. Lance joined Anterix in 2014 as Anterix was negotiating for the acquisition of 900 megahertz spectrum from Sprint. So he's been a real advocate for education on this topic for quite a long time, as you can tell. Lance earned his bachelor's degree in resource management from the State University of New York School of the Environment and Forestry at Syracuse University. And he also received a law degree from Pace University School of Law in New York. Up next, we have Patrick Rehnquist, who is Patrick is the principal solutions consultant for Ericsson North America. He's got more than 40 years of experience in telecommunications infrastructure, and in his current role, he leads Ericsson's mission critical network solutions for the North America market. Patrick holds a Master's of Science in Engineering Physics from Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg, Sweden, and we're delighted to have him today. Up next from Motorola is Scott Shapel. Scott is the Vice President of Global Enterprise for Motorola. And in this role, he's responsible for the overseeing of direct sales, engineering, program management, and services teams for all the enterprise verticals. Scott joined Motorola after graduating from Marquette University with a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering. Then we have Dr. Mauricio Subieta from Nokia. He is the Regional Chief Technology Officer for the energy segment, and he leads the industrial cybersecurity program as well as the technical lead for their private LTE program. And that's the enterprise division of Nokia that focuses on the energy segment, including electric utilities, oil and gas, and mining. He completed his undergraduate studies in systems engineering from Bolivian Catholic University and his master's and doctoral degrees in telecommunications management and electrical engineering from Oklahoma State University. He's also worked in the past for Oklahoma Gas and Electric and Chesapeake Energy as well. So lots of great experience there. And last but certainly not least, Warren Westrup from Sierra Wireless. Warren has more than 25 years of experience working in electric and gas utility industries, as well as experience in wireless communications. He started his career with GE Utility Services Group and then worked also for CPS Energy. So now he is the Director of Business Development at Sierra Wireless, and he partners with utility consultants, OEMs, and telecom carriers to take advantage of Sierra Wireless's solutions. So I want to get started first. I want to turn it first to Lance Johnson. Lance, like I said, has worked with industry leaders in formulating the proposal for the report and order, the rules modification for the 900 megahertz band to create this broadband opportunity, and certainly has been a great advocate for us for education around this industry. We call on him quite a lot for this educational piece. So Lance, I want to turn it straight to you.
Thank you very much, Bobby. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. So I'll just give a little bit of background and then I'll go into how a particular enterprise could get a broadband license or lease. Okay. So Anterix is a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ that partners with critical infrastructure industries and enterprises to enable their digital business modernization initiatives through the transformative power of private broadband. And saying that real easily is not always that easy. So critically, what we're trying to do and what we've done is create this broadband allocation from 936.5 to 939.5. In 2014, Anterix's predecessor company filed a petition for rulemaking requesting a broadband allocation in the 900 megahertz band. It wasn't exactly where this allocation that we have now, but it was close to it. And through the process at the FCC of comments and reply comments, we eventually got to a notice of proposed rulemaking in 2019, where the FCC released a notice of proposed rulemaking with this exact channel band plan, and stated that it would be licenses would be based on a county by county basis. As Bobby stated, by unanimous vote last month, the FCC delivered on that decision a year after the notice proposed rulemaking that provides all of us the opportunity to flesh out the details of how Anterix will provide those broadband licenses for lease to interested parties and make sure that these systems can be brought to play for whatever types of opportunity that the utilities or enterprises want to put on their own private networks. So this is a rare opportunity to bring 6 megahertz of fresh spectrum to the broadband space. And it's a 3 megahertz by 3 megahertz solution. It modernizes the legacy rules covering the 10 megahertz of spectrum in the 900 megahertz band to allow that 6 megahertz for broadband, and remains 4 megahertz for continued narrowband use. The rules establish a well-defined path for Anterix to convert its nationwide narrowband 900 megahertz spectrum position into a broadband license in every single county in the country. And this rulemaking and rules respond to numerous industrial enterprises, especially the utilities, that have filed requests at the FCC over many years requesting a broadband allocation to build private LTE networks to solve their highly critical, mission-critical needs. This enables Anterix to launch its true broadband business, which we endeavored to create back in 2014 with the acquisition of the Sprint spectrum. And we've moved forward now to focus on the long-term leasing of this broadband spectrum to utilities and other critical industries. Bobby, next page. So let's go into the particular rules. So, as I stated, the geographic 900 megahertz broadband licenses will be licensed by county. There's about 3,200 counties or county-like jurisdictions in the United States. And in over 3,100 of those counties, Anterix has greater than 50% of the licensed channels in the entire band in those particular counties. And that's the first eligibility criteria for becoming a broadband licensee in the 900 megahertz band. The second eligibility criteria is that the broadband applicant have the spectrum or has agreements covering 90% of the licensed channels in the broadband segment in and within 70 miles of a particular county. Anterix currently meets this requirement in over half the counties in the nation, and outreach and negotiations are underway with approximately 350 licensees around the country. Some of those licensees are very small, holding one channel in one place. Others are quite significantly large systems, such as Evergy, who we reached agreement with earlier this year on relocating their system outside of the broadband allocation and into the narrowband allocation. The broadband applicant will file a transition plan detailing its spectrum holdings and/or the agreements it reached with covered incumbents for relocation, for acquisition of channels, or for protection of those channels through agreed upon means. There are protection requirements in the rules between narrowband licensees and the broadband licensee. If indeed agreement is not reached with all the licensees in a particular county, the broadband licensee can trigger a mandatory retuning requirements if of those remaining 10% of the channels, and it will work with them to clear the broadband segment through a comparable facilities requirement that's been well used in past proceedings at the FCC. There is an exemption for complex systems. Those complex systems are defined in the FCC's report and order as those systems that have 45 or more functionally integrated sites. These are base station sites, typical for land mobile radio. Also, the third requirement is that it has to hold or obtain 240 channels out of the 399 channels in the band. If it does not, the applicant must pay the difference based upon the 600 megahertz auction prices that occurred in 2017 for the amount of spectrum it needs to make up. So a good example would be if a broadband applicant had 200 channels and 240 channels are necessary, that's 1 megahertz of spectrum, and the megahertz dollar per price of a particular county was $1 a dollar a megahertz pop, and there was 1 million people, it would be $1 million. It's a very simple calculation, but it has to be done for every single county. Once that's done and that application is put forward and pays any windfall payments, any anti-windfall payment to the US Treasury, the applicant then returns to the FCC all of its licensed 900 megahertz narrowband spectrum up to that 6 megahertz. That remaining spectrum outside of the broadband allocation then becomes available for narrowband licensing in the future pursuant to the FCC's future public notice. Right now, we're waiting for the FCC's public notice to come out and put forward the details and the timing of these broadband applications to go forward. And after there is a application put forward and Anterix receives a license, we will then be leasing on a county by county basis to organizations to build their own private LTE networks to their own particular specifications. And that's all I have today. Thank you, Bobby.
Thanks, Lance. That really sets the stage and answers a lot of those burning questions. And speaking of questions, we've already got a lot coming in. Keep putting them in there. We're going to hold all the questions till after the presentations, but we are getting those. So thank you to those folks who are putting in questions in the tool. So next then, let's go to Patrick Ringquist from Ericsson. Patrick?
Thank you, Bobby. So just first a little bit about Ericsson in case you're not familiar with our company. So we are a leader in wireless technology, cellular wireless technology, serving service providers, operators, and industry worldwide. We are working primarily in the network side, and we divided our business into a couple of different business areas to serve that market as well. We are about $24 billion worldwide in sales and almost 100,000 employees. So we're a large company, present worldwide, and with a large business with our service providers that we can leverage for building LTE networks also for utilities. We are technology focused. We work a lot with technology. We have a large number of patents. We lead the standards in 3GPP and developing both the 4G and also now the 5G standards. We already are enabling transition into 5G. We have, for example, shipped already 5 million 5G ready radios. We shipped that since, for the last 5 years, we have shipped 5G ready radios that are upgradable to 5G by software. And we already have 31 live 5G networks in place. So transition from 4G to 5G is here. We are aiming to work on with you, everybody, to do that smoothly. We are working with our technology to deliver full network potential. So we are working on a smooth evolution path, a very efficient network, high performance, a lot of automated to bring the cost and cost structure down. A little bit on, so this is what we're doing for service providers, and we're serving all the big service providers here in US, 4G and 5G. But we're also applying the same technology into private and dedicated networks for industry in general and utilities in particular. So we are serving specific needs, private networks, using the same solutions, the same base solutions that we have for service providers. And here in US, one of our leading customers is Southern Link. And you may have heard of Southern Link. They're a subsidiary of Southern Company located in southeastern United States. And they have built a mission-critical LTE network to enable their smart grid application leveraging Ericsson technology. And we're now in the process of implementing and already have implemented mission-critical push-to-talk on the same network. So this is a leading example, and we can share a lot of experiences from that. Now, if you go into solutions a little bit more in detail, Lance talked about spectrum, and of course, spectrum is the necessary for wireless network. It's the lifeblood. Without spectrum, it doesn't work. And now, when 900 megahertz spectrum is available, you also need to start looking at what type of solutions do you need. So we divide the solutions into three major components: the radio network, the core network, and management or operational support systems. And what we're working on is to make this a mission-critical network. So we are applying a little bit different techniques when we are building and operating these networks than we do with commercial service provider to meet the mission-critical needs. So we have a vast experience from this, both here in US and worldwide, on how to do this. So some other points, what we need to think about when we are deploying these type of networks. So first, there are many different ways to deploy these networks, and there is no one size fits all. Every utility is unique, each deployment is unique, and you need many different a rich portfolio to support all these different deployment scenarios. So this could be from a large macro site to small cells to distributed networking to centralized networking, and all of these things needs to be supported by the network. So this is an important part, and we Ericsson have worked hard on this and do have a rich portfolio that can support this type of deployment scenarios. The second piece, and this is a lot of what we're talking with utilities around, is how we can secure a mission-critical network performance. So this includes a number of different things. It includes features in the network to ensure that you have the right capabilities, the right priorities, the right performance of the network, as well as building practices to ensure that you have redundancy, that you have the right latency, that you have the security, etc. So there are a number of different techniques and different things that you need to do in the network to do that. For example, you can employ redundant backhauls to ensure that your transport network always is up and running, that the site is always up and running. A lot of this is dependent on how you build your network. It's a lot about redundancy. It's a lot about building practices. So we know we have the experience and we know how to do that. So very important to have that discussion as you start your journey towards LTE network. The last piece on the mission critical network performance is around operations. So once you have built it, you need to operate it and maintain it to ensure that you have the right performance. We Ericsson, we have a very large operations organization that operate networks on behalf of our customers. And we have large experience in how to operate mission-critical networks, how to ensure that the network is up and running at all times. We do things like pre-staging in times of disasters to ensure that we can do fast recovery if there is a failure. And we do things like we have a lot of analytics tools. We have what we call our operations engine that's using AI technology to ensure that network is up and running, up and performing, and using AI technology to detect issues and do optimizations. So the whole span of mission critical network performance goes from both features, building practices, how you build a network, as well as how you operate the network. So now, when you have built the network, what are you going to do with it? Why are you building this network? And maybe this is why you should start, actually, because you build the network according to use cases. So first of all, you have the IoT use cases on the top right here. And you have different types of IoT use cases. And this can coexist then with mobile broadband, which is what you normally get from your service providers, your operators today. So these could be your smartphones or your tablets and those type of things. But then you need to connect various devices. Most of our utilities we talk to are very interested in IoT. We divide it up into 3 types of IoT: broadband, massive IoT, and critical IoT. And depending on the use cases, you have different techniques and different technologies to support this. But the whole idea here is that you can have one network that supports both your broadband, mobile broadband, your workforce, as well as IoT use cases for smart grid applications on one network. And the more applications you can leverage and the more applications you can run on your network, the better your business case and return on investment will be. Last, I want to spend a few minutes on mission critical networks. So as you perhaps know, in 3GPP, which is a standardization body for LTE, they have defined a mission critical push to talk solution that on a functionality level is on par with what you traditionally have with LMR networks. Now, to get it to be mission critical, you need to ensure that it's verified end-to-end and that it runs over a mission critical grade LTE network. So we have developed this solution, done a lot of end-to-end verification to ensure that it works properly. And we can now deliver mission critical push to talk. And we have delivered that to several customers, so it is in operation. Most of the customers are doing this in a kind of a crawl, walk, run approach, starting with, because it's so mission critical that you don't want to do a big bang. So you start it small and then you gradually migrate over to this. But it's available and it's an important function and important feature in thinking about when you're deploying your LTE network. So all in all, technology is here, spectrum is here. So now it is time to start thinking about how to leverage this in private networks for utilities. Thank you, Bobby.
Great, Patrick. Thank you so much. Let's jump straight on then to Motorola and Scott Shapel. Scott?
Hey, thank you, Bobby. Good afternoon. I think many on the call are familiar with Motorola Solutions from our land mobile radio networks, as most utilities are using land mobile radio today and have benefited from that mission critical network and capability that it provides. What may be less familiar to many is some of the other capabilities and platforms that we have. We've been in the broadband data and SCADA businesses for decades. Matter of fact, I think many on the phone have or are using our MOSCAD platform, MOSCAD RTUs today. We're also a leading provider of mission critical push to talk. So that platform is currently deployed at AT&T, Verizon, and Sprint, as well as several of our enterprise customers. Video and security and analytics. So we have a platform called Avigilon that's being deployed actually at several utilities for security, protection of people and assets. And finally, a company that continues to innovate. You know, after 91 plus years in business, through both organic R&D investment and through acquisitions, we continue to innovate. Next slide. So as a result of that continued innovation and our heritage really in reliable, redundant wireless networks, we've launched our private LTE platform that leverages the new spectrum opportunities that have become available recently. So the 900 megahertz band and the CBRS band. A couple key pieces I'll kind of touch on here. So first on the core side, our LTE core is available both on-premise as well as cloud architectures. To provide that flexibility. On the eNode side, our 900 megahertz high power eNode B has significant specification improvements over the current standards. This is really driven by our ground up approach to building this based on our narrowband heritage and the ability to operate in a environment where there's no guard band. So we think this is going to be a critical piece of the success of 900 megahertz. High power edge devices. First, we have a 2-watt radio at 900 megahertz, which allows you to achieve the 10-watt EIRP capability that's allowed by the report and order to really expand the coverage footprint. And secondly, multiple configurations available. So multiple SIM cards, multiple radios available. So for example, you could pair 900 megahertz LTE with CBRS, or you could pair up 900 megahertz with one of the carriers. So if you want to start deploying on a carrier and migrate to 900 megahertz as the spectrum becomes available and the broadband capability becomes available, you can do that. And probably the last piece I'll touch on here is really the LMR interoperability. We have a platform called Critical Connect. It's really based on our mission critical push-to-talk platform that allows us to integrate land mobile radio systems, the current investment our customers have in that, into the broadband world to share voice, data, and location information between the networks. So a couple highlights, but pretty excited about our broadband platform here. So with that, back to you, Bobby.
All right, Scott, thank you so much. Let's jump then on to Dr. Mauricio Subieta from Nokia. Mauricio?
Thank you very much, Bobby. Yes, thank you for the opportunity of presenting today alongside of our distinguished guests. Nokia, is pretty much a lot of people know, is a company that has been for many years providing communication platforms. We actually are a global company with around 98,000 employees. A lot of that is basically driven by research and investment and development because of new technologies that we bring to connect the world, as our logo says. Within that experience and within that realm, we actually have been working with several partners in industry here in the US as well as globally, deploying private networks as we see that more and more the use cases and the needs and the requirements are focused on providing this type of infrastructure that in most cases certain industries cannot get from carriers and the services they commercially offer. So as such, we've actually have about 150 plus networks that are private that have been deployed within different countries in the world with different types of use cases. And a lot of use cases we're going to talk a little bit in the next slide. But we have been having this successful experience about deploying that. We're also obviously a leader with 5G deployments, and we have quite a few 5G networks deployed in both the actual commercial and private sectors. So that is, in a nutshell, Nokia. And specifically, I come from a segment which is part of the global energy practice that focuses on mission critical applications. I think some of our previous guests have clearly explained how a lot of the actual private network effort goes into supporting these mission critical applications. So we've actually had this portfolio for many years now, and we've been working on trying to help out industries get into the actual mindset of deploying these networks and LTE networks under a single roof. So if we could go to the next slide, please. I can actually talk a little bit about what are the opportunities that 900 megahertz realignment actually brings. So being that the theme of this presentation, I think it's important to realize that the key aspect for any deployment and for any type of private network is actual to spectrum. Thus far, industry has been relying on the commercial carriers just because they hog all that spectrum, right? And rightfully so. They actually provide a very important service. However, a lot of the actual industries that we work with also want to deploy their own networks. And to a certain extent, they didn't do that using technologies such as LTE or 5G because of the perceived complexity that those imply. However, I think that more and more people are realizing that to the market, for example, Nokia is bringing simplified solutions that can keep the actual industry focused on their core competency and focusing on a simplified deployment and simplified platform to bring these services onto them. But the key still is spectrum, right? So access to spectrum and the work that Anterix has been doing has been key to these efforts, utilities, mines, oil and gas, and other enterprises really now have an opportunity to actually deploy their own networks without having problems or without having to be in congested environments, as was the case. As you mentioned during the intros, my experience with utilities, oil and gas companies, as well as some municipalities, show me that a lot of the problems that we've had within those industries deploying networks is that we had to be in environments that were heavily congested. The ISM bands, for example, 2.4, 5.8, and even the public side of the 900 megahertz actually is really difficult to deploy a network that supports the requirements of mission critical applications, right? So thus far, the theme in the previous presentations have been mission critical IoT. Well, that really does require to have specific spectrum to be available. This is really what enables and provides the opportunity to all of these enterprises and industries to have something that they can reliably run their services on. And those services actually are really comprised of many things, such as use cases that every day keep popping up in the market. And having a plethora of use cases now requires to try to simplify the actual technology underlying, right? So having a single network that provides all the requirements for all the use cases is key. And that's also the opportunity that we are seeing now, that technologies like the ones we provide to the market successfully and very as a leader are driving this migration to a single infrastructure of all these use cases. And a lot of what we see also in industry as things keep evolving and modernizing are related to automation. Basically, automation is taking over a lot of the actual workload that normally was handled by humans, trying to remove all that human interaction to avoid mistakes or to become more efficient, right? The key to that automation, though, goes back to reliable communication. Having devices that can talk, having the spectrum that those devices can talk to on securely and reliably is important. One of the key drivers that we've seen as part of the Industrial Revolution 4.0 is automation. And this revolution is actually reliant on ultra reliability and massive connectivity. Those are some of the precepts that were taken into consideration by the 3GPP in a very important way, such that the actual evolution from LTE to 5G and the standards themselves actually now take into account these two areas very with a major focus, right? And that really is the key to enable an industrial revolution, the Industrial Revolution 4.0. That's what we've been doing at Nokia for the last few years, is enabling the technology to support this. And finally, Anterix has been a key partner for us to work with for a few years now, with whom we've actually brought private networks to several mission critical applications and critical infrastructure industry players that with this rebanding actually now it makes open to everybody. So these are the opportunities that we see as part of the actual realignment that's being brought by the 900 megahertz band, and it's a definite welcome opportunity for us to be part of the market, to work with the customers, meet their needs, and have partners like Anterix, for example, with which we can work and bring these solutions to our customers. That's what I have, Bobby. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great, thank you, Mauricio. Finally, I want to get to Warren Westrup from Sierra Wireless. Warren?
Hey, thank you, Bobby. Yes, just a little bit about Sierra. You know, we've been in business since 1993. What we do is we're really the leading manufacturer of cellular modules. So just so the audience knows, you know, modules are essentially the RF chipsets, devices that go into things like electric meters, for example, AMI. We also make rugged gateways that are used to connect a lot of the grid equipment like reclosers, cap banks, and sectionalizers out on the distribution grid. And lastly, we also have some IoT platforms for building IoT applications. You can see on the right-hand side, we have a strong presence in the utility market. You can see, for example, there's some of our customers. You see the fixed applications. That's what I mentioned before. That's really connecting the grid assets. You can see some of our key customers like Eversource and Duke and National Grid. And then on the right side of that drawing down at the bottom, we also do a lot with connecting service vehicles, utility vehicles like bucket trucks, for things like telematics, getting mobile data to and from the utility worker, and creating what we call now a vehicle area network. Essentially, you have a rugged gateway in the vehicle, and then also having Wi-Fi, so the worker, the utility worker, can be untethered and get outside the vehicle with tablets or whatever. Next slide, please, Bobby. So this is how we look at the 900 megahertz. It is, the way we look at it is it's transformational spectrum. Not only is it used for the usual things that utilities want, optimal coverage to support their operation, reliability, always critical as a critical infrastructure provider, for sure with security and all the things that are going now, protecting the grid, protecting the infrastructure, and then longevity. But the other thing that I really feel like, or we feel like, that really gives us an opportunity for utilities to innovate with lower costs. The thing is bringing more IoT into the grid, Internet of Things into the grid, being able to create real new ideas, applications. Really, the way we look at it is the possibilities are endless. There's so many different applications if you can do it cost effectively. Things like monitoring even strain gauges or pole tilt, on telephones and transmission towers. Things like monitoring downtown network transformers, network distribution for flooding. There's just so many opportunities if you have the right spectrum and you have the capability and the ability to innovate. So that's the value we see out of this, Bobby.
Excellent, Warren. Thank you very much. So we're going to jump right into some questions. I've been taking notes, and there's some questions coming in from the audience. Again, audience, use your tool for the questions. We're going to start with questions from the audience and from the team here. So Warren, I want to start back with you and push on that just a little bit. What do you see are some of the bigger implementation challenges in deploying a private LTE?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things is, because obviously we've been working on several projects. What we're finding, Bobby, is that a lot of the utilities want to get started on a public carrier, and then they want to be able to roll out their private network over time. And part of that is what's really important is they don't want to have to go back out and visit those devices, those cellular devices, to essentially flash them over to their private network. So with some of our capabilities, that's something, an EUICC, embedded SIM, eSIM, that's a capability that we're working on to really make that seamless for the end customer. So they can get started with their DA project or whatever it is, and then be able to swap it over as their private network is built out. So we see that as one of the big concerns that I think that we're working to solve for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's terrific. Absolutely. So I heard Patrick and Scott both talk a bit about the LMR network and the interoperability now with an LTE network. What does that convergence look like? I'd like to ask both of you to maybe share a little bit more about that. Scott, if you want to jump in first, and then Patrick follow on there with that question.
Yeah, so we're as I talk to our utility customers, first of all, many of them see continued use of LMR for the foreseeable future. As I had mentioned in the earlier slides, we have a platform called Critical Connect that allows you to seamlessly move push-to-talk calls as well as location and some data between those networks. I think that really allows you to kind of one, interoperate them, but two, also migrate over time at your own pace. I think Patrick had mentioned before, crawl, walk, run, and that ability to integrate those networks together will certainly provide for for that migration if and when a utility is interested in migrating to a full LTE capability.
Okay, Patrick?
Yes, so I can agree. I agree with Scott. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't see this as being a big bang type of transition. So most likely, LMR network and LTE push-to-talk over LTE will coexist for some time. So it's very important that you have interoperability between the two networks, that you can share talk routes, share information between the two networks. And as users gradually migrate from one network to another network, that they can get the consistent experience and participate in that. Unfortunately, there are now standardized interoperability solutions leveraging standards both from a 3GPP point of view, but also from an LMR world point of view, that allows that interoperability from a technology point of view. So the technology is there, and it makes it a good way to introduce push-to-talk over LTE in a way that doesn't jeopardize already existing, well-established procedures and processes, so you can do this over time.
Great, thanks. So Lance, we've had some questions from the audience as well about really how soon can a utility or an interested broadband user begin to move into discussions with Anterix on the spectrum leasing. Could you talk a little bit more about that, and perhaps even the next step in the FCC process? Just a little more clarification on that. That's always the big question.
Certainly, thanks, Bobby. We encourage folks to reach out to us immediately because we know it's going to take a while for these networks to get built, and we can prioritize their area that they may want their spectrum for clearing. I'll just mention, although it sounds like a big task of 350 licensees to be moved out of the band, there's actually 2,600 counties in the nation where there are no site-specific licensees. So there's a large portion of the nation where there is no clearing necessary for the initial deployment of a LTE network. So I encourage them all to reach out, and many potential enterprises and utilities have reached out to us, and we've begun discussions with many of them. What was the other portion of your question?
Well, just really was the next step.
Yes, the next step, yep, is the FCC will release a public notice indicating the time and the exact parameters of an application. The report and order gives you the general parameters of the application, but it doesn't give you the time when the application can actually be submitted. So we know the general parameters of the needs of the applicant to put in there. Now we'll know exactly when they can be put forward and exactly what needs to be in those applications when that public notice comes out.
Okay, great, thank you. So Mauricio, then, is Nokia the provider of the equipment there supporting these deployments in this band? When can that start? When can, from the Nokia perspective, start?
We've been actually already working with some customers deploying their networks. We actually used temporary licenses from the FCC in order to achieve this. And as soon as the actual notice and the order becomes part of the docket and actually goes into register, we will be able to, complete the process of getting FCC certification for our products. Some of them are already certified, some of them just need a little tweak, but we are ready to go to market right now. And I think that a lot of people have been counting on that, as well as in the availability of the ecosystem. Because it is important not only to have the main system, but also the devices that are going to be working within that system. And I think, like Warren was saying, Sierra was developing the modules, and there's a lot of actual people using the band 8 throughout the world, which is similar to 900 megahertz here. We actually see that in industry, we are ready to move forward with whatever options the customer has as endpoint devices, as well as our own, of course.
Yeah, great. So that's a great segue. So Warren, what about the module and device ecosystems from your perspective? As what equipment needs to be realigned? What equipment needs to be tweaked? What are you seeing on that side?
Well, we do, like Mauricio said, this Band-Aid has been a global spectrum. So there is already a ecosystem that's been developed. And so we do have a portfolio, both from a module side and a gateway side, that supports, the Band-Aid. Obviously, it has to be FCC certified here for, North America, for the United States. So, a lot of the equipment that has been out there for tests and for pilots and things is using our modules and gateways. The other thing that we're seeing, and this is important, and this is where you're going to see the roadmap continue to support 900, is on the low power wide area, essentially the Cat-M and the narrowband IoT. Those are really, really important, and most of the projects that we see are really focused on using that technology for volt-var optimization, for direct transfer trip, a lot of the applications that are going out on the grid. And why that's important is because, the devices are lower cost, the modules are less expensive, but more importantly is the coverage and the link loss budget you get by using that technology. So it really gives you a much bigger coverage footprint by using that technology. And what does that boil down to for the utility that's deploying a private system? That's less sites. So it makes it much more economical for them, to deploy their private network by using that type of technology. So definitely the module and the device ecosystem will grow. We're working with, some of the chipset providers and everything else to make it happen.
That's great, Warren. Total cost of ownership is always a question. We've gotten a lot of questions about pricing and cost. I'm going to leave those. So for those of you who put those in, we're not going to ignore you on those. I'm going to pull all of those down and we're going to address those directly with you, because it depends would be the answer to a lot of those pricing questions. But certainly, Mauricio, is there a minimum size of an enterprise that would support this LTE 5G type technology? We can't talk really cost because it depends, but are there minimum sizes of an enterprise?
Actually, no, not really. One of the things that we've been doing within Nokia within the last few years is trying to bring the carrier grade experience and the carrier grade reliability and the quality of our products to an enterprise level. And we've successfully been able to do that. And we've actually had customers that have deployed networks from a very small area and going all the way to national coverage. And I'm talking about private networks. So there is really not a size that we have a product for or as a limit in the size. So we really focus on the use cases. We try to tackle the use cases from the customer's perspective, and really our platform allows us to start very small and be able to grow to have millions of different connected devices. Just like Warren was talking, I think one of the things we've seen as well is a lot of emphasis in the IoT, in the narrowband IoT world of devices, interconnected devices that are very little data transmitting, but they are plenty of devices. So we can start with very small deployments all the way to the large millions of devices deployments.
Great. Thank you for that. Scott, the report and order certainly is going to allow for some high power capabilities and new use cases, and that's what UBBA is focusing on. We have working groups talking about this all the time, but how does this really impact system design?
So when I think about the power limits that are afforded by the RNO, I think it's a great opportunity for our customers. Leverage existing LMR footprints, for example, leverage those sites, the backhaul, the backup power, and all those things that go into sites to really replicate that kind of coverage. The challenge is when you look at those high power levels, when it's in next door to the LMR piece without the guard band, that just needs to be done with the right equipment and the right system design, looking at both the LMR and the LTE and how they work together. So absolutely doable and a great opportunity, I think, with leveraging that power to really cover your territory. So just some things around the equipment and the LMR cohabitation that need to be really looked at.
Great, excellent. Yeah, we hear a bit about potential for interference and how we'll prevent those things. Any comment on that?
Yeah, I think there's multiple ways interference can happen, but I think it comes down to proper narrowband equipment. Most of the current radios that are in use are certainly adequate from an interference protection standpoint. Having the right LTE equipment goes beyond 3GPP standards to ensure that you're controlling your out-of-band emissions that come from the LTE side. And then it's really system design and taking into account where an LMR site is versus an LTE site, the power levels, the antenna patterns, and those things to make sure that they can coexist without any negative impact. And absolutely doable, but really need to focus on the system design piece as well as the equipment specs.
And if I may add there, Bobby, actually we've had experience with some of our customers that have deployed both systems and that really focused on testing their interoperability. And we've been able to see, to Scott's point, that having a good network design and a good system design overall actually makes it so that neither one of the systems interfere each other, because interference goes both ways, and that we are actually able to get maximum system performance on both with the proper engineering. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you for adding that, definitely. Lance, anything you wanted to add there? I know that's kind of off the cuff.
No, that's all right. I think the vendors know that much better than I do. So.
Yeah, cool, excellent. So we're coming close to the top of the hour. I can't believe how fast it went by. Let me ask each one of you for a comment. You guys all talk to utilities all the time. This is your bread and butter. This is what you've been doing for years and years. What interest or specific trends are you seeing come from your utility customers about the 900 megahertz report and order? Warren, we'll go reverse order. Warren, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, no, I think what I get from talking with utilities about the 900 megahertz is, again, they're excited about it. One of the big things is they can, we've gone from few IoT devices in the grid, in the past, 20 years, to so many that we're moving forward with all the things that are going on. And so to be able to do that cost effectively, the utilities I talk to, they really see that this, having their own spectrum that could have so many functions and applications on it to support that is really, it just makes, financial sense for them, financial business sense, the things that they need to operate. So that's what I'm getting out of it, more so than anything else, Bobby.
Okay. Mauricio, what are you hearing?
We've been actually following this development for many years now. I mean, there's other groups of people, like utilities, for example, UTC, that's been trying to get spectrum or clearly allocate some bands in order for their membership to be able to use this as their use cases, like Warren just mentioned, really are mission critical and they require this. So the expectation now with the 900 megahertz realignment is that finally we have an opportunity that we can capitalize and actually start using it. So I see a lot of excitement. They see a lot of opportunities. They see a lot of potential on how to deploy their use cases, multiple use cases in a single infrastructure. And hopefully things are going to start moving faster now that we have the blessing from the FCC.
Great. Scott?
Yeah, I agree with the last couple comments. I think we're seeing excitement around this very unique opportunity to access broadband spectrum and deploy private networks. So I think there's a lot of excitement about it. So I agree with the previous comments.
Okay. Patrick, anything else from your utility customer perspective?
Yeah, sure. So we have talked to utilities for several years about LTE, and there's been a lot of interest, and people are interested in leveraging LTE for smart grid, IoT applications, and various types of voice and broadband applications. There's always been one thing that kind of held it back a little bit, and that's been availability of spectrum. and the high cost of spectrum from an auction point of view. So this opportunity here now with spectrum becoming available should help utilities to take the next step into their journey on LTE and start really thinking about how to deploy LTE, perhaps starting with some trials to evaluate various technologies and various use cases, or goes directly to a full-scale deployment. But we can see now that with this spectrum availability, we are ready to go to the next step, not just talk, but start doing a lot of things in utilities. And I see utilities are eager doing that.
Great. And Lance, last thought from your utility?
Certainly. So thank you, Bobby, once again for putting this together. Things are moving faster. We are seeing more interest. There's vast amounts of the country where there is no incumbent licensee. There's great places that you can deploy quickly, and we will help you figure out where those places are and help you get experimental licenses for those immediate needs, and then provide licenses and leases for the long-term needs of your corporations. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Lance. So we are right at the top of the hour. I want to thank the panelists for their time and effort putting this together and sharing their expertise with our audience. We have recorded this and it will be available on the ubba.com website. If you have questions about the Utility Broadband Alliance or further follow-up questions, you can see my contact information there. Feel free to reach out. Again, we will take all of the questions from the tool as well as the other ones here that we didn't get a chance to. We'll formulate a Q&A document and put that out on the ubba.com website as well. But again, I really appreciate our panelists' time and efforts and sharing their knowledge with us today. I appreciate all of the audience members joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful and safe rest of your day. Thank you.